في آب 2013 أصدر مصرف لبنان المركزي التعميم رقم 331 المتعلق بالشركات الناشئة أو ستارت أبس، معلناً بذلك ضخ مبلغ 400 مليون دولار أمريكي في السوق المحلي لدعم وتشجيع الاستثمار في القطاع الرقمي اللبناني وتوفير بيئة حاضنة لهذا القطاع والحد من هجرة الشباب. هذا البرنامج يسلط الضوء على هذا القطاع التكنولوجي المهم والإنجازات العديدة للشباب اللبناني المستفيد من هذا التعميم.
مرحبا واهلا وسهلا فيكم بحلقه جديده من ستارت اب 31 بسنه 2022. اليوم بدنا ننزل على الجامعه الامريكيه ببيروت الاي يو بي تنشوف مركز دروسه سنتر للانكيوبيشن للستارت ابس شو عنده جديد من الستارت ابات يقدم لنا اياها. أعزائنا نحن هلأ بالجامعة الأمريكية في بيروت AUB ومعنا مدير الدروزة سنتر وأيضا Associate Professor ب OSB عليان Business School دكتور بيجان أزاد. دكتور بيجان, good morning.
Good morning.
It's been a long time.
It has been.
We had you in 2018 and now we're meeting you after the crisis and during times of crisis. I would like to start with you with how did you navigate OSB and Darwaza Center through this crisis since 2019 till today?
First of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure, always. Your program is the, I think, only one in Lebanon, if not only one in the Middle East, MENA region, to address this issue. So it's a pleasure to be on your program again, and thank you for including me. I think reflecting on what has happened since 2019, first of all, I think we have had multiple crises. So I think, let's be clear.
Indeed we have, yes.
Yes, it's not one crisis we dealt with. And then each one of them was, let's say, the way it happened was very, it's a shock to the system. Yeah. And also each one in a way we dealt with differently. And then of course had negative impact and we have had to improvise. So first of all, I think what happened was that we had this problem with foreign exchange and the dollar crisis that happened in 2019. And at first was going to be, we thought it was going to be very short term, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't. The second, which I think was COVID crisis.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Was, I think you can tell, I think economy has suffered because any in-person activity has suffered big time. Exactly. Any country got the COVID crisis, they were hit economically, right?
There was a center as an incubator, a propeller of startups. You're taking university students from AUB and those who have entrepreneurial initiatives, and you're forming them on specifically the startup world and the entrepreneurial world. How did that affect the startups mainly? Students, we understand, but when it comes to startups, how did it affect them? Did you change course? Did you pivot? Did you change the criteria by which you make your selections of the ideas to turn them into successful startups? This is the point that is crucial to us to know.
As a university, we train and build the capacity of entrepreneurs. I think some of our partners in the ecosystem are better equipped to take care of companies and startups. What we do is that we have the startups because in order to train the students to be entrepreneurs, we need the startups. You can't just in the vacuum, because you teach them book information, they can get that from anywhere. But if you want to train them how to more or less worry about where are the customers for your startup, is the economics of what you're trying to set up. Let's say if you want to make a new interior design service, is the economics of that viable? Should you establish in Lebanon? Should you establish abroad? What kind of financing can you look for? Should you bootstrap yourself or should? These are the things they need to learn. So what I want to distinguish is that I just want to be clear about this because we focus on building the capacity of entrepreneurs because we think actually that that's our duty. We owe it to the, our clientele, right? Along the way, they set up startups. Ahlan wa sahlan, let's hope it succeeds and we would do our best. Bringing it back to the financial crisis, we really now want, and we have made a concerted effort that if we have advertised for either our competition, which we give a meager amount, but also introduce students to the startup culture, or through our courses, we insist that they need to worry about the external market now. If they used to do that as a necessity, now it's not a necessity, now it's imperative. You cannot do it otherwise. Exactly. Why? Precisely for the reason you mentioned. Because a Lebanese startup has to worry about exporting. Why? If it's not exporting, you have a problem because more or less the current market, first of all, does not in a position to afford your products, perhaps. One. Second, foreign exchange is coming from outside, and we are in dire need of foreign exchange. So those are the two things we have actually, so going back to, because I wanted to bring it back to the point you asked, those are the two things we have really tried to do, which is clearly, for instance, we have submitted 2-3 proposals to funding agencies, and we hope one of those will come through. We want to really focus on export orientation.
You brought up something that we were having a discussion before we started our interview, is that I'm mourning the decline of the tech startups. Now I'm seeing the ecosystem is pivoting towards more traditional companies or topics like agriculture, fashion, food, and so on. Whereas the program was initially to promote the technology startups, that today we are witnessing a decline, because I noticed that the ecosystem is pivoting towards traditional. What is your take on this? Do you think this is a problem or this is something promising?
What I like to say is that on the surface, I think when we were doing the knowledge economy through the central bank program, it was, let's call it knowledge economy and IT and ICT 1.0.
Yeah.
And indeed, the 1.0 version was all, the way it was is that you focused on what was immediately in front of you, which is, let's say you want to put a product online, or you want to do an app, or more or less you want to do something in fintech. These are all app-based, let's say, or ICT-based, and ICT is very prominent. Now, as we are transitioning, by the way, we are not the only ones, the world is transitioning. What is hot these days is digital transformation. Digital transformation means that we no longer focus only on the app itself, but we want to go, for instance, to the banks and see, okay, which part of your operations can be totally digitized or partially digitized, and maybe that should be a spun off, no longer as a bank. In agriculture, I think we can deploy technology to do a lot of things. Irrigation in Lebanon is extremely, extremely outdated in agriculture. That's something that can use computer technology and improve the quality of agriculture.
And save water.
Absolutely. And we know that other countries, our neighbors, do that very well. And our soil is the same, our weather is the same. We have as much water, but we don't use water efficiently. So those are where I see a slightly different, in the sense that I see technology is now serving a more or less all-encompassing role. It's, the new initiatives, startups, ventures are focusing on those things, but not enough. And I like to see more. Again, we submitted a proposal to one of the donors to actually help the agricultural sector to really modernize irrigation by using more or less precision agriculture, that we know we need it, but we are not doing enough. So actually, I see that it's like 2.0 version of what we used to do. It's more transforming the economy through ICT. Application of ICT to the rest of the economy, application of knowledge aspects, and modernizing the rest of the economy.
Do you think that traditional people, like traditional, I mean, I know this, you know this, the startup knows this, even business experts, they know this. But when you go and talk to a farmer, let's say, who's been doing this since decades, and you tell him, look, I want to introduce technology into your irrigation, it helps you save money, do you think they're open to it, especially in a time of crisis?
Short answer is no.
Dr. Bijan, going back to Darwaza Center, we talked about the past and the crisis. Now I would like to have your view on the road ahead. Where is Darwaza Center going? What are the new initiatives? Did you pivot, or are you still on course? What's the road ahead? What's the roadmap that you have for Darwaza Center and new startups at AUB?
What we are pivoting towards, actually going again, focusing on two elements, what should drive our work. Import substitution, we want at least to some extent Lebanese economy to support, so that you don't have to import everything like we used to. And the reason is it's not sustainable, and the standard of living has really declined. World Bank published their study about a year ago, and they retitled it, that we need to move out of this. This is a heavy depression. I think they say there are 4 crises in the last century in different 180 countries that they keep track of. Ours economy has really gone through that.
Unfortunately.
One of the key things is import. We can't be importing this much. So import substitution has to be part of government's approach, but also the private sector. And I think a lot of companies are doing that. Second is export promotion. Again, systematically reorienting us for the things we teach people, the things we focus on, and also the orientation of the economy has to be such that our products are competitive abroad. Knowledge economy is on the right track. The rest of the economy must become on track. For instance, I know you mentioned that everybody is focusing on agriculture, but to me, agricultural exports is something that I feel we have a strong point. Lebanon has a competitive advantage in food. You know very well, Lebanese food is everywhere.
Yeah.
And and then in the US, you eat hummus. Okay, it's in every supermarket. Just take that as an example that you can really export products. The stumbling block there is you need good standards, and you need compliance with the standards. You need a whole ecosystem that's taken for granted elsewhere, because people make those products, it meets the standard, and it goes to Europe. In Lebanon, we cannot export milk products because EU and the US don't have the certification for the milk that is produced in Lebanon.
I was going to ask you about that when you're talking about export, I was going to ask you, do we have the standards? I mean, people trust European products because they know they have a high level of standards. Do we meet those standards in order to export?
Currently, we don't. And that's why I think, again, when you say we reorient, so for instance, we are working with several private sector entities, Chamber of Commerce and Association of Lebanese Industrialists. We just started talking to them. We really think this is where university and private sector can come together, and we think also then the government must move along as well, but really at least take initiative to do that. Standards of food safety and food is generally, certification of food has to become something that's, basic. And this is something that in the rest of the world, industry leads along with the government, but we need, more or less start leading on this more, because I think this is key. This is a sector of the economy that we can have high value added products.
But the hidden problem is who will enforce these standards?
But this is where, for instance, in the rest of the world, there is an entity called Global Standard 1. Global Standard 1 is part of the, let's say, a standard body in general.
Yep.
This is private sector entity, totally. It's voluntary, but what they do is that if you become a member, then you have to apply the same standard of food safety across. There is a Lebanese chapter, and they have been working to more or less penetrate the rest of the market.
Kind of like ISO.
Exactly. And so what needs to happen is that this to become self-imposed. Why? It's to your advantage as an industrialist to be able to export. So by starting to more or less making this more common and available and also doable, then industrialists and private sector will see more advantages that by complying, you'll be able to export. And I think this also, we have high value added potential products. For instance, I don't think, I know for a fact that I go someplace, I go to, for instance, in the US or Europe, there are stores like Aziz, and they sell high-end products. Why not Lebanon be on the map for its, I don't know, various kinds of things that I know, for instance, we can make thyme za'atar. Why not have flavored za'atar and then sell it abroad? Why not make flavored, basturma and sell it abroad? So from my point of view, the potential is unmatched. Why? There is more and more what we call, I don't know if you've heard the term, long tail. Long tail means that we used to make one product for the whole market. Long tail means that you make very, very niche products, and by a small artisanal companies being able to feed those markets, they actually survive, and also they make enough foreign exchange more or less to be successful. This is something I think we need more and more to focus on. Tahini is generically produced. Halewa is generically produced. Why not have signature halewa? Why not have signature tahini?
Strawberry halewa.
Why not? Why not? So you see where I'm going with this.
Yeah,
But these are the things that are enabler for that to happen. And we need to become like our counterparts elsewhere in the world, where the private sector is starting to take more initiative along these lines. And I'm really happy that really they are, because more or less they see that's the only way towards the future. So going back to what at the Darwaza Center, we are reorienting ourselves to helping these, because we see these are enablers of moving forward. It's not just focusing on the startups or companies. We want to focus on the step before that, because we need the ecosystem to be enabled to move towards that. And as our mission, because we are a university entity, we really think that's important. And especially the knowledge of it is here, and we have the students' brain power. Why not we work with the private sector to do that? So this is an example of the type of things that, again, we are pivoting towards, because we think the name of the game is not just the startups. It's not just helping the companies, and it's not just doing traditional education. It's actually moving backwards in the value chain.
Dr. Bijan Azad, I would like to thank you for this interview, and I would also like to thank you and congratulate you for keeping Darwaza Center alive in this mega crisis, and keep going forward with the kind of resolve that you have. I appreciate that very much. Thank you a lot.
Thank you, Fuad. Thank you for making time to do this. And of course, we see that also, I think mutually, we very much relate to this, because we think this country has a lot of potential.
Of course.
And also amazing brain power and human capital. So we want to support this. Thank you for having me today on your program.
Thank you, sir. أعزائنا معنا إحدى شركات ستارت أبس من دروزة سنتر وهن برايز وينرز بهالشركة سيدرز كيميكال. مرحبا.
مرحبا.
جاد وليا. حنبلش بليا. Ladies first. خبرينا ليا كيف بلشت معكم و how did you come up، يعني كيف بلشتوا بهالفكرة وأصلاً أساساً what is Cedars Chemicals؟
سيدرز كيميكالز هي مثل ما قلت ستارت اب عم نحاول انه نعمل فيها فيرتلايزر باستخدام كثير من يعني القصص الموجوده بلبنان. بتعرف مع الدولار وهيك كثير عم بيصير صعب على المزارعين انه يستوردوا الفيرتلايزرز اللي بدهم يعوزوهم، فعم يلجأوا لطرق منا كتير منيحة لزرعهم ونحن كنا شايفين هاي المشكلة وكنا عم نحكي مع كم مزارع وكم حدا عنده مثل مزارع ومسؤول عنهم، كانوا كلهم عم بيحكوا عن ذات المشكلة انه الدولار ما عم بيسمح لهم وعم بيحكوا عم يستعملوا قصص منا كتير منيحة. فقلنا انه لازم نبلش نعمل هيك شيء، انه في عنا رو ماتيريال بلبنان اللي ما بنعوزها وبنعمل منها شيء بفيد المجتمع وبفيد المزارع وبصير فيه يعوزها لا يعمل فيرتلايزر كتير معروف ويقدر يعني يحسن إنتاجه بأسعار كتير منخفضة مقارنة مع الأسعار تاع الفيرتلايزر اللي عم يستورده هو هلا حاليا.
يعني الهدف منا انه نلاقي شيء لوكل لانه بارتفاع سعر الدولار وارخص وما ارخص، ولا هل هو انه ننتقل من فيرتلايزر كيميكال كيميائي واللي نحن نعرف انه ما كتير مفيد للصحه اللي كان يستعمل بالسابق الى فيرتلايزر تكون شوي اورجانيك يعني من مواد طبيعيه؟
صح. نحن فكرة هلا اللي عم نعمله هو بلشنا فيرتلايزر واحد، ومن هاي الفيرتلايزر عم نعمل بحث كرمال نقدر نطلع منه فيرتلايزرز اكثر واحسن مور سستينبل للمجتمع. يعني لما ينعمل فيرتلايزر المكانات اللي بيستعملوا كتير بيضروا البيئة وبيطلعوا روائح بشعة، وكل معامل اللي بتعمل كيميكالز المنطقة بتعاني من هالمشكلة. اللي نحن عم نعمله هو ننتبه للإكويبمنت اللي عم نستعملها، نقدر نكون نعمل شيء economically friendly, environmentally friendly، ولا يطلع fertilizers using اورجانيك رو ماتيريال، والرو ماتيريال اوريدي نحن بنجيبها اورجانيكلي من اللي هو الروك فوسفيت اللي نحن بنستعمله والفوسفوريك اسيد. ف
Is it healthy؟
البرودكشن تاع فوسفوريك اسيد اتس theoretically not، منه شيء للانفايرمنت فريندلي،
بس الكل عم يستعمله.
الكل عم بيعمله. يعني نحن ما عم نعمل الرو ماتيريال، نحن عم نجيب الرو ماتيريال بس لوكلي، بتنعمل لوكلي بلبنان وعم نستفيد منها بدل لانه بلبنان بيبعتوها لبرا، نحن عم ناخذها ونعمل منه اسمده لنبيعها بسعر ارخص ولا يقدر المزارعين والقطاع الاجريكلتشر هون يستفيد منها.
شو استفدتوا من دروزة سنتر؟ يعني دروزة سنتر انتم اخذتوا هون تريننج تبعكم والى اخره، شو اللي بتحسوه انه بدروزة سنتر اعطاكم مثل علامه فارقه اذا بدكم؟
أول شيء نحن بس فتنا على هاي الدروزة كنا نحن كتير عم نفوت بالديتيلز، يعني عم نحكي كتير كيمستري، عم نحكي كتير كلمات العالم إنه حيلا حدا ما كتير ممكن يفهمها. كتير كان عنا منتورز وكلهم كانوا عم بيلفتونا نظرنا إنه ما حدا بهمه هالقصص اللي نحن عم نحكي عنها الكتير ديتيلز، بهمهم فكرة أوسع وبهمهم شيء اللي يعني نعوز مصطلحات سهلة. فبعد عدة منتورينج وكتير زبطنا قصص قدرنا آخر شيء إنه نطلع من هاي الشغلة ونصير نطلع أكتر على الصورة أوسع وما نحكي إنه scientific terms اللي مش كل العالم بهمها ومش كل العالم ممكن
أخذوكم من chemical أو chemistry على البزنس. يعني جد أنتوا هلأ ربحتوا إلى جانب الجائزة مبلغ من المال، وين عم بتفكروا توظفوا هالمبلغ هيدا؟ يعني عم توظفوه إدارياً ولا إنتاجياً؟
نحن لما ربحنا دروزة كان يعني كنا على هاي المايلستون بدنا نجيب الايكويبمنت وبدنا نصنع الايكويبمنت، وعم نجرب نصنع كمان الايكويبمنت لوكالي كرمال هاي التكنولوجي اللي نحن عم نجرب نعملها تكون افيلبل لوكالي. يعني ما بدنا نجيب ايكويبمنت من برا تو امبورتد، بدنا نحن نعمله هون. فكتير من وقتنا قبل راح ريسيرش اند ديفلوبمنت للاكتشوال كيميكال. هلا من بعد ما ربحنا دروزة صرنا عم نقدر نطبق، نفوت على الفيلد ونعمل الايكويبمنت. فاللي عم ندرسه هلا هو ديزاين للايكويبمنت، الاوبتمايزيشن تاع الايكويبمنت، واكيد بارت من المصاري حيروح نجيب بيتنت للبرودكشن لاين لنا، يعني نبلش نستخدمه نقدر
هل في جزء من المال حتستعملوه للبراندنج او للاكسبورت حتى قبل البراند، يعني قبل انه تفكروا بالاكسبورت، يعني في لانه الاكسبورت بصير بده مجهود وريسورسز؟
صح. هلا هيدي
ولا بدكم هلا تضلكم بالسوق اللبناني وتختبروا السوق اللبناني بعدين تفكروا بالاكسبورت؟
صح. نحن يعني بلشنا بفكره انه بدنا نحسن او بدنا نجيب مثل شيء سوليوشن للسوق اللبناني. اكيد لبعدين اكسبورت هو انه اللي لازم يصير، بس اللي نحن هلا عم نفكر فيه وكل شيء عم نعمله هون لوكالي كرمال نقدر يستفيد السوق اللبناني اول شيء، بعدين اكيد بارت المصاري حيروح ماركتينج واكسبورتس وديستريبيوترز برا لبنان.
بتعتقدوا انه السوق اللبناني بكفيكم تستمروا؟
كأول بداية كأول مرحلة ايه، كرمال السوق اللبناني كتير بحاجة لهيدا الشيء هلا، بس مثل ما قال جاد اكيد ما حنضل هون كرمال نعرف الوضع مش كتير، بس نحن كان هدفنا نبلش هون وبعدين انه منشوف انه كيف القصص بتمشي، وانه لازم تو اكسبورت بعدين اكيد. بس هلا اول شيء عم نطلع على السوق اللبناني لنساعد بهيدا القطاع، وبعدين انه منشوف. قد
ايه بدكم وقت للجو تو ماركت، يعني تفوتوا على السوق؟
هلا مثل ما نحن مثل البلان اللي حاطينه والجانت شارت اللي عاملينه، المفروض ب4 اشهر او 5 اشهر يكون الايكويبمنت جاهز ونبلش نقدر تو بروديوس. واسايد من الايكويبمنت كمان انه عملنا لوجو، عم نعمل بدنا نعمل الاكياس والاناني اللي نبيع فيها، يعني انه كله هون بيمشي مع بعضه. فبظرف هول 5 اشهر نحن هلا كمان عم نتعلم كثير عن البزنس سايد، يعني نحن اثنيناتنا كيميكال انجينيرز، بس هلا يعني كثير انفولد ان ذا بزنس سايد، وللستارت اب تمشي لازم يكون هذا الانفولفمنت بالبزنس. وهذا كمان بارت من الدروزه من شو يعني شو استفدنا educational وايز من الكومبيتيشن ومن بعده. فمفروض يعني بهالتايم فريم بهالكوارتر او اللي بعده يكون عندنا برودكت ريدي تو بي تو امبلمنت.
اخر سؤال، بتعتقدوا انه المصاري اللي اجتكم من الجائزه تبع، يعني اخذتوا الجائزه الاولى وربحتوا مبلغ من المال، ما بدي اقول قد ايه، بس انه هالمبلغ هيدا بكفيكم تتكملوا، يعني بتقدروا تعملوا بوت سترابينج ولا لا بعدين فيما بعد بدكم تمويل اضافي عن المبلغ اللي اخذتوه؟
هلا كبدايه انه اكيد بيكفي، عشان نحن بدنا كمان نتاكد انه كل شيء مزبوط. بعدين اذا بدنا نوسع، اذا بدنا نكبر، اكيد بدنا مبلغ اكبر، بس انه بدنا نبلش من مطرح، وهيدا انه هو المصاري بينعازوا لنقدر نبلش من مطرح، وبعدين انه بنصير نوسع حسب انه كيف بتمشي الامور من بعدها.
ليا، جاد، سيدرز كيميكال، كو-فاوندرز لسيدرز كيميكال، بتمنى لكم كل النجاح ثانك يو، برافو يعني.
ثانك يو.
وهذا كان كل شيء لليلة، نلقاكم الأسبوع الجاي إن شاء الله بنفس الموعد، إلى اللقاء.